Captain Woojin Park stood at the command deck of the colony ship Endeavour, his hands gripping the railing as he stared at the view screen. The ship had been traveling for 3 years toward the Proxima Centauri system when the sensors detected something unusual. "Sir, multiple objects approaching at high speed," said Lieutenant Ju Kim, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Within minutes, the Endeavour found itself surrounded by vessels unlike anything humans had ever designed. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls shimmering with colors that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. "They're hailing us, Captain," Ju reported, fingers flying over her console. "The translation matrix is working. That's odd." The main screen flickered, revealing a being with elongated features and skin that rippled with iridescent patterns. When it spoke, its words came through in perfect Korean. "Greetings, human vessel. You have entered protected Galactic Council space. Please power down your propulsion systems and prepare for diplomatic contact." Woojin exchanged glances with his executive officer. "Diplomatic contact. They don't seem hostile. Yet," his XO muttered. "Power down engines, but keep defensive systems on standby," Woojin ordered, "and contact Earth immediately." Within hours, the Endeavour's diplomatic contingent, led by Ambassador Taho Kang, was shuttled to what appeared to be the Council's command vessel. Taho, a seasoned diplomat who had negotiated peace treaties during the water wars on Earth, found himself completely unprepared for what awaited him. The chamber held representatives from 27 different species. Some resembled Earth creatures, reptilian, mammalian, even insectoid, while others defied categorization entirely. Beams of living crystal sat beside floating orbs of pulsing light. A creature that seemed made of flowing smoke occupied a special containment field. "Welcome," said the iridescent-skinned being who had first contacted them. "I am Coordinator Yul. The Galactic Council has been aware of your species for some time, but this is our first direct contact." Taho bowed slightly. "We are honored. May I ask why you haven't contacted us before?" Yul's skin rippled in what might have been amusement. "Your species was considered too young. We typically wait until a civilization achieves sustainable interstellar travel before formal introduction." Over the next several days, the Council granted the humans observer status. Teams of alien researchers requested access to human historical and cultural records to better understand their new neighbors. Back on the Endeavour, Captain Woojin monitored the exchanges with growing unease. The Council representatives were friendly and forthcoming about their own cultures, but their questions about Earth history kept returning to one subject: warfare. They asked for complete access to our military archives. Jiwoo reported during their daily briefing. "I provided what was publicly available, as authorized." Woojin frowned. "Did they explain why?" "Cultural understanding," they said. "But Captain," Jiwoo hesitated, "they've been reviewing footage of World War II for hours. Their expressions, at least for the ones whose faces I can read, look disturbed. On the Council ship, a team of xenobiologists and cultural anthropologists were indeed watching historical footage from Earth's bloodiest conflicts. They observed bombing raids over Dresden, beach landings at Normandy, jungle fighting in Vietnam, urban warfare in Iraq. They strategically target civilian infrastructure. One researcher noted, skin paling to a sickly yellow. Not just military targets. And this nuclear deterrence concept," another added. "They built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization and pointed them at each other for decades." Yul, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "In 12,000 years of Council history, we have never encountered a species that developed warfare to this degree of sophistication." "Is it sophistication," asked another Council member, "or evolutionary aberration?" Meanwhile, Ambassador Taho was enjoying a cultural exchange with representatives from 3 different worlds when an aide hurriedly approached Coordinator Yul. After a brief whispered conversation, Yul's skin darkened to a deep blue. "Ambassador Kang, I must excuse myself. An emergency council session has been called. Is there a problem? Tahoe asked, suddenly concerned. Not at all, Yule replied, but his skin pattern betrayed his unease. Merely a procedural matter regarding your species integration. As Yule departed, Tahoe caught the whispered words of another council member to their companion. They've developed strategies specifically to maximize casualties. It's unprecedented. Back on the Endeavor, Captain Mujin received an urgent message from Tahoe. The emergency council session had been called without human representatives. Something about their review of human history had triggered a response that went beyond mere cultural curiosity. They're afraid of us. Wujin realized, the irony not lost on him. Humanity, so long fearful of what might await them among the stars, had become the thing to be feared. Senior researcher Minji Choi walked slowly through the curved hallways of the council research station. Her steps echoed against the polished floor as she carried her final report. After weeks of studying human history, she felt a heaviness in her chest that had nothing to do with the station's gravity settings. The door to Director Hyunki Lee's office slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Hyunki was reviewing holographic displays of Earth's military development timeline. You've completed your assessment? Hyunki asked without looking up. Minji placed her data pad on the desk. Yes, Director. I've confirmed my initial findings. Hyunki finally looked at her, his eyes tired from days of continuous work. And humans possess what appears to be an evolutionary anomaly, Minji said, keeping her voice steady despite her unease. Their approach to warfare is fundamentally different from every other spacefaring species we've encountered. Hyunki gestured to the chair across from him. Explain. Minji sat down and brought up her own display. Images of human conflicts through the ages appeared. Ancient armies clashing with swords, World War I battle scenes, modern combat footage. In all 27 council species, warfare evolved as a means of establishing dominance with minimal losses. Even the Vargos, who we once considered aggressive, developed complex territorial displays to avoid actual combat. She swiped to a new image. Earth cities reduced to rubble. Humans took a different path. They developed warfare beyond its function. They created doctrines specifically designed to maximize enemy losses. Hyunki leaned forward. You're certain of this? Completely. They call it total war, the concept of targeting civilian infrastructure to break the enemy's will to fight. Their strategic bombing campaigns deliberately created terror among non-combatants. Hyunki's expression darkened. The council must be informed immediately. The next day, the High Council chamber was sealed for a classified session. The 27 representatives sat in a circular arrangement, with Hyunki standing at the center presentation area. Minjae waited nervously at the side. Esteemed council members, Hyunki began. Our xenopsychology team has completed its assessment of human warfare development. The findings are concerning. The chamber's display systems activated, showing a simulation of Earth's historical conflicts. The council members watched in silence as civilizations rose and fell in waves of conquest. What we're witnessing is unprecedented in galactic history, Hyunki continued. While all council species evolved away from lethal conflict, humans refined and perfected it. A council member with blue-tinged scales raised a hand. Could this be simply because they developed in isolation, without our guidance? We considered that possibility, Hyunki replied. But even species that developed independently, like the Maratha, evolved similar conflict minimization strategies. Humans are unique. Another council member, this one a semi-translucent being, spoke. Perhaps it's environmental. Their planet has harsh conditions. Minhya stepped forward. With respect, several council species evolved in far harsher environments. The key difference appears to be psychological. She activated a new display showing human military doctrine texts. Humans created entire philosophies around warfare. They studied it, perfected it, honored it. Their military leaders are celebrated in their culture. They have concepts like preemptive strikes and mutually assured destruction that simply don't exist in other species. The council chamber grew silent as the implications sank in. Most disturbing, Hyunki added, is their concept of deterrence. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization, then pointed them at each other for decades, believing the fear of total destruction would prevent any destruction. A council elder with pale, wrinkled skin spoke slowly. And did it work? Yes, Minji admitted. That's what makes it so dangerous. Their strategies, however brutal, proved effective. The council deliberated for hours. Minjae and Hyunki waited as arguments flowed back and forth. Some council members advocated for limited contact, others for full integration with human societies. A small faction even suggested breaking contact entirely. Finally, the council reached its decision. The eldest member turned to Hyunki. Our assessment is clear. Human military thinking represents a potential destabilizing influence on our 12,000-year galactic peace. Their strategies, if adopted by less stable council members, could upend our entire security framework. Hyunki nodded. What will you do? We will welcome humans into the galactic community, the elder said, but with conditions. For the first time in council history, we will implement species-specific restrictions. As Minjia left the chamber, she passed Ambassador Taho in the hallway. He smiled at her, unaware that the report she carried would forever change humanity's place among the stars. She couldn't bring herself to smile back. Later, Minji stared out the viewport at Earth's blue sphere. Humans had survived their violent tendencies long enough to reach the stars. But now, faced with a galaxy that had moved beyond such thinking, would they be able to adapt once more? The Council's decision was already being drafted. The Human Military Containment Act would soon become the first of its kind in galactic law. President Somin-Yoon stepped out of the transport vessel and onto the shining platform. The Council capital world of Harmonium stretched before her in all its glory. Towering structures of crystal and light reached into the purple sky. Flying vehicles moved in perfect patterns between the buildings. It was beautiful, advanced, and completely overwhelming. Remember to smile, whispered her advisor. Earth's future depends on this. Behind Somin walked 30 human representatives, scientists, diplomats, and military officers. They had spent months preparing for this moment, the formal welcome of humanity into the Galactic Council. Elder Dohan Bot approached, his tall figure moving with the grace of his species. His skin shimmered with patterns that humans had learned indicated formal greeting. President Yoon, welcome to Harmonium, he said, touching his forehead in the traditional council gesture. Today marks a historic occasion. The ceremony proceeded through the Great Hall of the Council. Representatives of all 27 member species watched as humans were officially recognized. Music played from instruments humans couldn't identify. Lights danced in patterns that seemed to tell stories. When the time came for the signing, President Yoon approached the central platform. The accession document glowed on the surface, the text shifting between Earth languages and Council standard. As she lifted the ceremonial pen, Somin recalled her private meeting with Elder Doan the previous evening. The Human Military Containment Act is non-negotiable, he had told her, his skin patterns showing no room for debate. Your weapons designs and tactics cannot leave your solar system. But we have the right to defend our colonies, Somin had argued. You may defend, yes, but your methods of warfare remain quarantined to your home system. This is the condition of your membership. Now, standing before the assembled council, Somin signed her name with a forced smile. The gathered delegates applauded, and Elder Dohan proclaimed humanity the 28th species to join the galactic community. Later that evening, at the reception, Somin found herself cornered by a group of council diplomats. Your species has much to offer, said one being composed mostly of shifting vapor. Your music alone is worth the risks. Risks? Somin asked, though she knew the answer. Another delegate, reptilian in appearance, shifted uncomfortably. Forgive my colleague's directness. We simply mean that every species brings challenges along with benefits. Defense Minister Junho Kwon joined their circle, nodding politely to the aliens. President Yoon, the military delegation would like a word when you have a moment. Once they were alone in a quiet corner, Junho's professional demeanor cracked. This is humiliating. They're treating us like children who can't be trusted with sharp objects. I know, Soman replied. But what choice do we have? Their technology is centuries beyond ours. Several Earth nations are threatening to reject the treaty, Junho said. Russia and the North American alliance feel particularly insulted. They'll fall in line, Soman said. What's the alternative? Challenge the Council with our primitive weapons. We'd be crushed. 3 days later, Soman addressed the emergency meeting of Earth's United Nations. The chamber buzzed with angry voices as she took the podium. I understand your frustration, she began. But the reality is clear. We can accept these terms, or we can remain isolated in our solar system. Defense Minister Junho stepped forward to explain the military implications. We can serve on mixed crews throughout Council space, he said, but only in defensive capacities. Our military doctrine is effectively quarantined. So we're second-class citizens, a Russian delegate shouted. No, Junho corrected. We're valued for many things, our art, our philosophy, our genetic diversity. But our approach to warfare is considered dangerous. Over the following months, humans began integrating into Council society. Earth products became popular in galactic markets. Human music spread across thousands of worlds. Cultural exchange programs flourished. But in military matters, the containment remained strict. Human officers served on Council vessels, but were forbidden from commanding combat operations. Earth weapons designs could not be exported. Human tactical doctrines were classified as restricted knowledge. 5 years after joining the Council, Captain Woojin Park, now serving on a Council patrol vessel, sat in a mess hall with alien crewmates. We responded to that pirate attack too gently, complained a Maratha officer. They'll just attack another transport next week. What would you suggest? Asked another. The Maratha officer glanced at Woojin. Something more human. Woojin raised an eyebrow. You know I can't discuss that. By the 10th anniversary of Earth's membership, human warfare had become galactic slang for any excessive use of force. In diplomatic circles, suggesting a human solution meant an approach considered too aggressive or direct. Humans learned to live with their strange reputation, valued for their creativity and passion, but watched carefully for signs of their dangerous military thinking. Most accepted this as the price of admission to the stars. But when reports of a new threat began reaching the Council from the outer systems, some wondered if humanity's quarantine knowledge might someday be needed after all. Commander Sumgo Ryu rubbed his tired eyes as he monitored the quiet command center of Council headquarters. Third shift was always peaceful. Most Council species preferred to work during daylight hours. As the only human officer on duty, Sumgo often found himself alone with just a few night shift workers from nocturnal species. The calm shattered when the emergency channel flashed red. Incoming distress signal, announced the system in its neutral voice. Sumgo straightened in his chair. Display message. The main screen activated, showing a panicked colony administrator. The connection was poor, breaking up every few seconds. Colony 7-9 requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared from nowhere. Some kind of spatial rifts opening directly in our orbit. They're targeting our power centers and... The transmission cut off amid sounds of explosions. Sumgo's training kicked in. Alert the Defense Fleet. Wake Admiral Hong and the Council Security Committee. I need all available data from Colony 7-9. Within 20 minutes, Admiral Yeojin Hong rushed into the command center, still adjusting her uniform. Report, Commander, she ordered. Colony 7-9 was attacked by unidentified vessels, Sumgo explained. They appeared suddenly through what survivors described as tears in space and targeted key infrastructure. By the time I received authorization to dispatch response ships, the attackers had vanished. Yeojin's face hardened. Casualties: 27 dead, 41 injured. The colony's defense shield was disabled in the first strike. Before Yojin could respond, another alarm sounded. Colony 4-3 under attack, the system announced. Similar signature to 7-9 incident. Over the next 3 days, 2 more colonies suffered attacks. The pattern was identical, ships appearing from nowhere, striking vital targets, and disappearing before Council forces could respond. The Council Security Committee convened an emergency session. Sungho stood at attention as Admiral Yojin presented what little they knew. The attackers appear to use some form of spatial folding technology we haven't encountered before, she explained. They emerge, strike, and retreat within minutes. Council member Dohan frowned. Our defense doctrine is based on containment and overwhelming response. Why aren't our protocols working? Because they never stay to fight, Yojin admitted. We position our forces to surround and neutralize threats, but these raiders never allow themselves to be surrounded. Sungho shifted uncomfortably, drawing Dohan's attention. Commander Ryo, you have something to add. Sungho hesitated. Discussing human military tactics was still somewhat taboo. With respect, Council member, I believe I recognize the strategy being employed. Explain, Dohan ordered. They're using hit-and-run tactics, Sungho said carefully. It's classic guerrilla warfare, like Earth's historical insurgencies. They strike where you're weak, avoid direct confrontation, and disappear before your strength can be brought to bear. The room fell silent. Finally, Admiral Yojin spoke. Commander Ryo's assessment aligns with the data. Our defense forces are designed for conventional space battles, not this type of warfare. You're suggesting these Rift Raiders are using human-like tactics? Asked another council member. I'm saying they're using tactics that humanity has extensive experience countering, Sungho replied diplomatically. 2 weeks later, the raiders struck a major council agricultural world. Thousands died when atmospheric processors were destroyed. 4 days after that, they disabled a crucial communications relay, cutting off an entire sector. In the council's private chamber, the debate grew heated. 7 colonies lost, reported Admiral Yojin. Our standard protocols have failed to intercept even 1 raider vessel. Elder Dohan's skin pattern showed deep concern. If we cannot protect our people, the council loses its purpose. There may be a solution, Yojin said cautiously, but it would require adjusting our policies. Speak plainly. Admiral, the Human Military Containment Act has prevented us from utilizing human tactical knowledge. But right now, humans may be the only species with experience fighting this type of enemy. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members vehemently opposed any relaxation of the containment rules. Others saw no alternative. Finally, Elder Dohan made the decision. Issue a classified directive. Form a human advisory team, strictly advisory, to develop counter-strategies for these raiders. When Sungho received his new orders, he was both excited and nervous. After 15 years of restrictions, humans would finally be allowed to contribute their military expertise. The team would be small, classified, and limited in scope, but it was a start. As he packed for transfer to the front lines, Sungho wondered if the council fully understood what they were unleashing. Human military thinking had been contained for good reasons. Once that knowledge spread, the galaxy would never be quite the same. In the darkness of space, another rift opened near a peaceful council world. The raiders emerge, weapons charged, unaware that their next target would be defended by something the galaxy had never seen before: human tactics. Colonel Daehyun Moon took a deep breath as he entered the Council Defense Committee chamber. After 20 years of service under the Human Military Containment Act, this moment felt surreal. The circular room was filled with the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy, all watching him with a mixture of hope and unease. The tactical display activated as Daehyun stepped to the center of the room. It showed the patterns of raider attacks across Council space. 17 colonies hit, 9 completely destroyed. Thank you for this opportunity, Daehyun began. For the past 3 months, my team has analyzed every raider attack. We've identified a critical weakness in your defense strategy. Elder Dohan's skin rippled with concern. Explain, Colonel. Daehyun pointed to the display. The Rift Raiders exploit your predictable response patterns. Your defense doctrine is based on surrounding threats with overwhelming force. But this takes time to organize, and the Raiders never stay in one place long enough. He showed a simulation of Council forces moving into position as a red dot, representing Raiders, appeared and disappeared before they could be engaged. We need to implement asymmetric countermeasures and establish credible deterrence, Daehyun continued. The Council representatives shifted uncomfortably at these forbidden human concepts. For 15 years, terms like asymmetric warfare had been restricted under the Containment Act. Assistant Director Yoonji Lim stepped forward. As the liaison between the Human Advisory Team and the Council, she had spent weeks preparing for this presentation. Our team has developed a counterinsurgency framework, she explained, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. But it requires human-led tactical teams in key systems. Admiral Yeo Jin Hong frowned. You're asking us to put humans in command of combat operations. This violates the core principle of the Containment Act. We understand your concerns, Yoonji replied. But consider the alternative. The Raiders have destroyed 9 colonies already. Millions have died or been displaced. Your current approach is not working. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members firmly opposed any change to the Containment Act. Others saw no choice but to try the human strategy. Finally, Elder Dohan made his decision. We will implement a modified version of your plan. 10 systems will receive human tactical teams, on a trial basis only. 1 month later, the Rift Raiders emerged near Colony 12-4. Their spatial rifts opened as usual, and their ships moved toward the planet's orbital defenses. But something was different. Instead of finding a typical Council defense formation preparing to surround them, the Raiders encountered scattered, unpredictable patrol patterns. When they targeted the colony's main power station, hidden defense platforms activated from unexpected positions. For the first time, Raider ships were caught and destroyed before they could retreat. The survivors fled in disarray. Similar scenes played out across Council space, where human tactical teams led the defense. Raider attacks were repelled with minimal losses. The human concept of defense in depth, placing overlapping, redundant defenses at irregular intervals, proved highly effective against hit-and-run tactics. After 6 months, the attacks decreased dramatically. After 8 months, they stopped entirely. In a historic session of the full Galactic Council, Elder Dohan addressed the assembled representatives. For 12,000 years, the Council has maintained peace through predictable, measured responses to aggression. This approach served us well. Until now. The Rift Raiders exploited our predictability and nearly brought us to our knees. He gestured to Colonel Daehyun and the human delegation seated to one side of the chamber. Today we must acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. The human approach to conflict, the very thinking we sought to contain, saved countless lives. Their evolutionary path, which we once viewed as aberrant, has proven to be a necessary adaptation for a more complex and dangerous galaxy than we imagined. The council chamber buzzed with conversation as Dohan continued. I propose a modification to the Human Military Containment Act. Human strategic thinking will no longer be classified as a restricted knowledge domain. Instead, it will be recognized as a specialized field of expertise. The Defense Force will establish a permanent human tactical division, train our officers, and develop new security protocols. The vote was not unanimous, but the measure passed with a strong majority. Captain Woojin Park, now promoted to Command Advisor, watched the signing ceremony from the gallery. Standing beside him was Joo Kim, who had been with him on that first contact mission 15 years ago. Did you ever imagine it would end like this? She asked quietly. Woojin shook his head. Never. When they first told us our military thinking was dangerous, I thought we'd always be second-class citizens in the galaxy. As Elder Dohan signed the modified act, Wujin reflected that humanity's most troubling trait had ultimately become its greatest contribution to galactic peace. The very capacity for warfare that had nearly destroyed Earth had now saved countless lives across the stars. Maybe that's our real purpose out here, he said, not to fight wars, but to remember them, so others don't have to learn those lessons the hard way. A necessary evolution, Ju agreed, as a new chapter in human-galactic relations began.